Welcome to all of you today to the 40-Minute Forum. This morning we begin our 5th year and the 13th series of the Forum, and this is actually our 65th event, and it is indeed a very special one. The matter of inequality might seem to some people to be the flavor of the week. Just a few days ago, Environics published the results of a poll indicating that Canadians are worried about inequality and would pay more taxes to fight it. Various recent reports about Toronto highlight the social disparity that is rapidly increasing in our city. And in many places around the world, the recent occupation movement protested the dangerous us and them that marks our time. But for Michael Ignatieff, concern about this polarization is nothing new. He has written and thought about it for decades. Whether he was in academia or in politics, it was and continues to be very close to the center of his concerns. And I must tell you that I also learned only a moment ago that even though Mr. Ignatieff has been observing this inequality in our city and in our country for many, many years, we at St. Clement's have caused him to pause and consider it in light of things theological. So Michael was reading the Gospels before coming to see us today. And his wife, Susanna, said to me, I hope that this will be good for everyone, but I have to tell you, it is already good for Michael because he's rereading the Bible. When we approached him about speaking today, he immediately raised inequality as his choice of topic. And so for me today, it is a privilege and a pleasure to welcome our speaker, Michael Ignatieff. Welcome.
It's a great honor and pleasure to be with you this morning. This forum is extremely well titled because the 40 minutes is protects you and it warns me. So I will try and get right to it. And it is true, I was reading the Gospel according to St. Matthew last night because I was looking for I guess it's Matthew 21, chapter 20, verse 21, about Christ chasing the money changers from the temple. Put me in the appropriate mood here. What I got from the Gospels was very simple, which is that I can't see in the Christian Gospels dislike of wealth, dislike of success, but I do get from the Gospels a sense that there is a place for money and there's a place for the sacred. When Christ drove the money changers out, I don't think he was saying the money changers didn't have a place, but they didn't have a place in the temple. I think that when you look at Christ's message, you see a man very concerned with the thought that it's not wealth itself, but wealth combined with absolute poverty, which seemed wrong to the Lord. So I drew instruction from the Gospels. Susanna was slightly surprised to see me reading my King James. I have the Bible I was given when I was 8 years old, and it has my old scrawly signature on it, and it was a great pleasure to go back to it, and so I have to thank this wonderful community for moving me 1 centimeter from barbarism to civilization, which is my wife's life's work right there. I want to talk to you about inequality in our country, and I've got a few numbers, but don't worry, there are not too many of them, because I wanted to talk to us about what's happened to our country since 1980, the last 30 years of our lives. Because something has been happening, and some of the numbers capture some of the elements of it. The richest 1% of our country, that is everybody earning $250,000 or more, that richest 1% has gained their share of national income from 8 to 13%. Don't worry, there's not going to be an exam at the end of this, so you don't need to remember. I'm just giving you orders of magnitude. The richest, the top 0.1%, that is the people whose incomes, family incomes are over 400,000, have doubled their share of national income from about 2% to 5%. So our story is that Canada has been getting richer since 1980. It's been growing since 1980. All of that seems to me a very good thing. But the benefit of that growth and that wealth has been going to the top end of the distribution. The middle class of our country has basically stagnated. The incomes, after-tax incomes of Canadians in the middle class have stagnated since 1980, and I suspect that's many people in this room. The poor, the very poor, have been kept from falling through the grate by federal transfers, and so the rich are getting a lot richer and a bigger share of the national income. The middle class is stagnating. And one of the interesting things that I noticed when I looked at an OECD study, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development study, was that two other factors need to be mentioned in this story. One of them is that the top federal tax rate in Canada has gone from 43% to 29% in this period. So the percentage of tax paid by the very wealthy has gone down from 43 to 29 in this period, at the same time as their share of national income has increased. So that's just a fact. The really interesting number to me, and believe me, with this, numbers will be over. We'll be out of the numbers area very soon. In 1980, the tax and benefit systems of our country offset 70% of income inequality. By 2008, the tax benefit system was offsetting only 40%. So that's the end of the numbers. But what do the numbers tell you? The numbers tell you that the top 1% is gaining more and more of the national income. The middle class is stagnating. Federal tax as a percentage of national income is declining. That is, we're clawing back less tax. And the tax and benefit system is doing a less good job counteracting inequality. Okay? So that's the rough story of what's happened in our country. And then the question we'd want to ask is, okay, what kind of a problem is that? Is that a problem? Is there something wrong with that? Is there something evil and wicked and must be corrected? And the answers to that are not, I think, obvious. I mean, why shouldn't hardworking, successful people make a lot of money? What's the problem here? Is there something unjust about the story I've just told you? So, I think one thing that is a problem is that when the middle class income stagnates, it means that the only way that the middle class can improve their standard of living is to borrow. And one of the things we've seen since 1980 is the Canadian middle class has to borrow more to keep up. And so we've gone from a society where you had a mortgage and you had some credit card to a society that's very heavily in debt. And Mr. Carney, our Governor of Bank of Canada, never stops telling you one number, which is that for every dollar of income, Canadians owe $1.40, and now it's up to $1.53. So one immediate effect of inequality has been we're all borrowing more just to stay in the same place. And one of the questions you might ask is can an economy continue to grow? Can we all continue to prosper when the whole middle bunch of that income is borrowing to stay in the same place? Because we all know what happens if we're borrowing. All the governor of the Bank of Canada has to do is raise that interest rate, and a lot of families are going to be underwater. I mean, a lot of families. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Canadians, if that interest rate goes up, are suddenly going to be in what they call negative equity. So that's one problem we've got, which is that we're borrowing to keep our prosperity in place. And I'm not sure that's a good story about how Canada is going to grow in the future. If all the gains of economic growth are going to a tiny percentage, and the growth is not shared by the broad mass of the community, I think that gives us problems for the economic future of our country. So I think inequality raises questions about whether we can continue to grow. That's not immediately an issue about injustice, but it's an issue. Where are we going to get the growth from? How are those middle-class families going to pay for post-secondary education for their kids, for example, when it's pretty tight? So that's one issue. The other issue might be, what kind of a society do we have when the top earners are kind of semi-detached from the society? Nothing bad happens to them, right? They're kind of in the departure, they're in the privilege lounge in the airport, right? And that happens they kind of separate themselves from the rest of us. Do you want to have a society where you have that kind of separation from people who no longer share the common life? Their income allows them basically to secede from the rest of society. That's an issue we want to. And then you want to ask the question, if they secede from society, are they going to care about the people at the bottom? There, Jesus did have things to say, very clearly things to say. He thought there was something wrong, deeply, deeply wrong about a society where some people had more than they could ever use and some people had not enough. So will we deal with absolute deprivation? Will we deal with absolute poverty in a society where we have increasing inequality of income? Let's just pause before we think about why this might be wrong and ask a little more why this is happening. Because it's happening all over the world. This story is not just a story about Canada, it's a story in the United States, even more so in the United States, in Great Britain and France. Everywhere you go, income inequality has gotten more unequal since the 1970s. And every society in the Western world is wondering, what kind of problem do we have and what can we do about it? What people say is that we now have a global market in skills. So if you have someone who works in, say, I'm going to pick an obvious example, someone who works down in Bay Street in resource and mining investment. Canada is the best in the world at mining and the best in the world at investment in mining.